Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, it's Jessa. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. So glad you're here listening. I love doing this podcast. I'm here every week sharing information, tips, interviews, insight, hopefully inspiration to help you create your best possible relationship and sex life with your partner. I think it's important. That's why I'm taking the time to do this. Really passionate about bringing you information that's going to make a difference for you. I would love to hear whether that's the case. If you're enjoying the show, if you have thoughts about what you're liking or what you want to hear, please email me. I'm at change, CHANGE @jessazimmerman.com, or you can leave a note through the bettersexpodcast.com website. Love to hear from you. And you can actually, on the podcast website, you can record questions. So if you're interested in asking a question anonymously and having me answer it on one of the shows, I would love to hear from you. So please get in touch. I am excited about today's topic because this doesn't affect everybody, but for the couples that struggle with infertility, this is a big deal. It can make a huge difference. It can put a huge strain, I guess I will say, on your relationship and on your sex life. If you want to get pregnant and you're having trouble, whether that means you've been trying for a while on your own or whether you're in the midst of infertility treatment, it's a big deal. And my guest today is Dr. Stephanie Beuhler. So she's a licensed therapist, ASECT certified sex therapist, and she's affiliated with the Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, where she works with breast cancer survivors. But she's the author of best-selling book, Counseling Couples Before, During, and After Pregnancy, Intimacy and Sexuality Issues. And she's got a real heart for infertility struggles and the impacts of those on couples. So she's here today to share, what are those impacts? What kinds of concerns and issues arise for people? And especially, what do you do if this has been a struggle for you and sex has sort of lost its magic? It's become a job. It's become a scientific endeavor. It's maybe become really disappointing, and anxiety-ridden. What do you do in your sex life and in your relationship? I'm just delighted to have her on, and I hope you enjoy the show. Stephanie, thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invite. Yeah.
This is a topic that comes up in my practice, not all the time, but pretty consistently. Couples struggling with infertility, pregnancy issues, and it affecting the relationship and their sex life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about what that experience is like for couples? I mean, obviously, there's a variety, but.
Right. Yeah. So
what happens?
Yeah. What happens? Well, these days, people are putting off getting married and having children, which has some benefits to it, right? It gives a more stable home life to children, and the divorce rate for older people when they marry is going down. So that's awesome. But, the difficult thing is that it makes getting pregnant more challenging. And so, more couples are facing infertility. About 10% of couples are diagnosed as being infertile, and it can be due to one or the other or both partners. And really, in terms of sex life, it doesn't really matter if the couple is trying to become pregnant with what they call timed intercourse, or if they are in fact doing some kind of artificial reproductive technology, so embryo implantation and so on. Either one can cause a great deal of anxiety and other feelings as well. A lot of worrying, depression, anger, impatience, hopelessness. a whole gamut of feelings that can come up when the couple feels like, gee, this should be easy for us. I mean, we should just be able to have intercourse and boom, there's a baby. But,
Right. Okay. So
right?
you're saying people may start to experience some of that even after just a couple of months of trying, right? It's not like they need to have
Well,
been diagnosed as infertile.
well, you know what? So the thing is, a lot of couples are told that there is infertility. So it may be on behalf of the male with, say, low sperm count, but he has enough that they're saying, you know what, you should try to get pregnant naturally. And maybe he's going to take some medication to increase his sperm count. Or it could be that the woman has, her cycles have been irregular and she's taking medication to regulate her cycle. Then the couple is going to be told to have timed intercourse,
Right.
right? And usually at that point, things are already tensed because, by the time they get to the doctor, they've already been trying on their own.
Right.
Usually, right? And maybe for a year, maybe longer, and realize that there's a problem.
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things I hear from clients, right, is that in the course of trying to get pregnant and battling infertility, perhaps, it changes the nature of their sexual relationship.
Yes. So,
Right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it becomes a job. It becomes work. It, becomes something robotic. That's a word that comes up a lot. Robotic, not something to look forward to. Men sometimes report that they feel resentment, like, they're just wanted. Even though, I mean, if we sit here and think about it, we know it's not true that a woman just wants her partner just for his sperm. We know,
right.
that she wants him, but for him, he may feel like, well, you just want me for my sperm right now, and that doesn't feel very good. There can be other things going on too, pressure from family members, where are the grandchildren? We want to see babies, cultural pressures, peer pressure. Everybody seems to be having a baby except us.
Right.
I had somebody recently who had a couple of sisters and friends, and they were all pregnant or had had babies except her. And she just felt so pressured to catch up. And they had, and like you said, it could be just a couple of months of trying. They had only been trying to get pregnant for maybe 3 months. And she did have something going on. I think she had endometriosis, had some kind of surgery. And they were in my office at the 3-month mark because she was so stressed out and so pressuring her partner so much that he developed erectile dysfunction.
Right. Right.
And the story from him was that when she was ovulating, she was at a conference out of town, drivable distance, but he was expected to drive through 2 or 3 hours of traffic to get to the hotel to have intercourse with her, and she was all upset, like, "What took you so long? You know how stressed I am." And of course, that was the end of it for him. Yeah, so they were in my office trying to make a repair and try to make this process something that brought them together instead of something tearing them apart.
Right. I mean, I'm sitting here getting tense just listening to that story. Right? And I know I hear from people, the pressure to perform on demand, like the stick says we got to go now, and it's
right.
Whether you're feeling like it or not, whether you're exhausted or not.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Whether your partner's 3 hours away through traffic or not.
Right.
That's a lot.
Right. It is. It is a lot of pressure.
Another thing I've heard, and I'm sure you've heard this from clients too, right? Is maybe one partner hasn't been so interested in sex, but now that they want a baby, all of a sudden,
Oh, yes, that's true. Yes. Yes. Right. Yeah. I had somebody in my office recently who said that she never had any interest except when they started trying to become pregnant. Then suddenly she had this incredible drive.
Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't just like a mental drive. It was like a body, like her body was so turned on with this idea of getting pregnant that she was seeking out her partner frequently. And so, and he's like, where is all of this coming from? Like he loved it, but it was very confusing for both of them. Like, why is
Yeah.
this happening now?
Right. Right.
So, and I think we kind of ignore, because today we depend on, or, some kind of contraceptive for family planning. So, seeing what happens when there's no contraception is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can make it hard too, because, if you've been like, you've spent, your like adult life up until the age of like 32, 33, older maybe, trying to prevent a pregnancy, and now you're trying to create one.
Right. It is definitely a mind shift, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a mind shift. But for some people, I remember I also had a woman who had postpartum, very bad postpartum depression, and then had like no drive. And she said that the only time she had a drive is when they were trying to become pregnant. But she had she didn't want to get pregnant again because she had gotten so depressed afterward.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so that was a very interesting, kind of ironic case. What do you do? What do you do in that case?
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Because you don't know if it's going to happen like that again. And yeah,
Mhm, mhm. There's
the
no
the risk
question.
benefit of analysis on that one is pretty tough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I know that, with couples where somebody's all of a sudden they've got a bunch of drive when they're getting pregnant, trying to get pregnant,
Mhm.
their partner may welcome that and be excited. But I've also heard them say, they distrust it. They may be resentful. Like, and this is, I guess, where they think, oh, maybe you only want me for my sperm or something.
Right. Yeah, definitely. They don't see, like, what's in it for me.
Yeah. Or this isn't about me. This is about a
Right.
baby or something.
Right. They're
Yeah.
kind of so detached from the whole idea of a baby. And, for men, not all men, I mean, some men are very involved, but for some portion of men, there's no interest in the baby until it's like out of the chute, until it's
Yeah.
alive and kicking. Like they're so concrete that until the baby has arrived. So the idea of creating life and creating a baby is kind of like, doesn't make sense to them. It's not something that happens to their body, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it's not something men prepare for psychologically. So I think women, many women say, "Oh yes, someday I want to have children," or even if you're ambivalent about having children, you still know that your body hopefully can naturally do this amazing thing. So you're looking forward to it, like, oh boy, this is going to be an experience for me. And I think the guy doesn't. He doesn't get that. He's kind of detached from the whole process.
Yeah.
So there's just a different experience that happens. And then, of course, if couples can talk about that, that would be ideal, right? But we know
Right.
couples have a hard time talking about many things, and this is one of them. And so another thing that happens too is that sometimes, in the cases that I've seen, it's often the male partner who has ambivalence about having a baby.
Yeah.
And yep, and she's going, okay, I want the sperm delivery man. Where is he? And he's very busy and preoccupied with work, for
Hmm.
example. He has lots of meetings and he's going out of town, and she's like, what is going on? And so I have had men come in by themselves to talk about this. Sometimes there are major problems in the relationship that make them think, uh-oh, if we have a baby, then I'm going to feel really stuck.
Yeah.
So I need to figure this out, because if I'm feeling this ambivalent now, what's going to happen later? I'm going to feel trapped. So that's very difficult.
Right. Right.
Thing to help people with is making the ultimate decision to become pregnant.
Yeah. And we all know it's, not a great idea to have a baby to save a relationship.
No.
Right. Like that's not you want to be on solid ground before you bring the baby.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And of
Yeah.
course, that many couples have an oops, a baby that was unplanned.
Right.
Right. So, that's something different than being intentional and saying, let's have a baby and let's do it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's different than being infertile too. If you
Right.
you
Yes.
oops it, right? Things are working.
Yes.
Is there anything different in your experience with same-sex couples that are struggling with infertility?
The thing is, no, there's not a lot of information on that. I mean, lesbian couples are going to have to use some kind of technology. They have to use donated sperm, and whether that's sperm donated from someone they know or an anonymous donor, they have to go through some kind of artificial reproductive technology. But I think it's a different thing. I think they know that's how it's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, male partners either are looking at adoption or using a surrogate. So the mindset is different, and they may come in because they're having some kind of struggle over maybe finding the right surrogate, or things happen. And I haven't had this in my practice, but I do know things can go wrong with the surrogate and that kind of thing. But as far as conceiving, their story is different from the heterosexual couple.
Right. It's not their sex that's going to result in a baby or not. So
exactly.
At least it maybe doesn't affect the sex life the same way.
Same way. It could. I mean, because there's tension, or case of lesbian partners, sometimes there's, I haven't seen this very often, but some jealousy about who is going to be carrying the baby, and
right,
quite a bit of attention, even if it's medical attention and so on. But what's interesting is that many people, when I wrote this book, said, oh, gay and lesbian couples are going to be having more children, so this is important. And the fact that they're getting married, the rate of having children is actually going down.
Really?
Yes. And the reason is most LGBT people have children because they were first in a heterosexual relationship. Maybe they weren't out yet, or maybe they were, trying to live a so-called straight life, and had children that way. So, when the time comes, if the relationship dissolves and then they find their path and come out as gay or lesbian, bisexual, now they have children. And so, that's the way that most LGBT people have children. And getting married doesn't mean, oh, yes, we can't wait to get married and have children. And the rate of parenting, the birth rate is going down for heterosexual couples as well. So many people are choosing not to have children.
Right.
So, so it makes sense that for LGBT people, unless they are really driven to want to have a family, and some are.
Yes, certainly some are. Yeah.
Some are. Others are going to say, you know what, it's not worth the trouble. Just like many heterosexual couples these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It does change your life, that's for sure.
That is for sure.
So what are the most common sexual problems, for like men, and then for women if they're struggling with infertility?
Right.
Like what are the repercussions?
Right. I think I'll take women first, because the major thing that I've seen is vaginismus, or painful intercourse. And that's a whole big thing, because that actually is diagnosed. If the woman wants to become pregnant and she has vaginismus, she's considered to be infertile.
Okay.
Because she has something going on that's preventing a pregnancy, and that's what infertility is.
Yeah.
So when you have women coming in with vaginismus, I always think it's really important to find out, because they may not say, you know what, I want to resolve this because I want to have a baby. Like, you have to ask what is going on as far as having children, because many times I've found that one of the things playing into the woman's vaginismus is fear around being pregnant, like being scared of what that experience is going to be like, not having a lot of fear around the idea of carrying something in your body, a growing fetus, or fears about the labor and delivery process, or fears about having a child. Like worried about uncertainty about whether or not one is going to be a good parent. Sometimes based on certain things, like maybe they have OCD or something like that, or depression, and they're not sure if they're going to be able to parent. So those are all things that need to be looked at with women who come in with vaginismus.
Now, could you just, for the listeners, describe what is vaginismus?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Vaginismus is when penetrative intercourse, penis-vagina intercourse, is not possible or nearly impossible. And these are women who generally cannot use tampons and cannot have an examination with a speculum, gynecological examination. Although it can be situational, maybe she can have, do an examination but not have intercourse. So couples can go for years until such time, occasionally such time as, one or both partners say, hey, you know what, what are we doing here? We can go on without having intercourse, but, if we want to have children, we need to resolve this and try to become pregnant naturally.
Yeah.
That's the ideal. So
now the cases of vaginismus I've seen in my practice, people have had it long term. I mean, it's sort of always been the case. Have you seen it where it's developed secondary to the fear of getting, either getting pregnant, having a baby, the birth and delivery, where it's been later onset like that?
You know what? It's hard to say. Like in one case, I had a woman who had been had seen her aunt giving birth. She was invited to be there. I think she was like 11 or 12, and something went wrong.
Mm.
And, there's like lots of blood, there's hemorrhaging. It was, she couldn't really even talk about it. But it was very traumatizing.
Yeah.
So then when she got married and was going to have intercourse, she couldn't have penetrative intercourse. And she attributed it to that moment. And this is somebody, and who knows? We don't know if that was always there or it developed then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So are there other sexual problems you see in women who are struggling with infertility?
They can lose interest in having sex sometimes if they've been going on several months with no result, no positive result. So they can start to get discouraged. The other thing is more difficulty with orgasm, as you can imagine, being preoccupied and worried during sex about, is this going to work? Is this going to be the time that we get pregnant? Is it going to be another so-called failure? And so that can happen too. And also because when couples are trying to have baby-making sex, sometimes it's not as passionate or exciting as sex that they might have at other times.
Yeah, they're sort of doing the minimum required, right?
Right. Yeah. So sex can start to become something they don't really look forward to. And of course, the thing is we bring on another type of assistive technology, the trusty vibrator.
Right.
But sometimes that's the first. Yeah. And sometimes that's the first time that a woman is going to be using a vibrator. She's a younger woman and she hasn't had any problems until that time. Then that might be when she and her partner need to use vibrator to get things going.
Right. Hey, I've just taken a quick break in the show, and I want to draw your attention to my new book. It's called Sex Without Stress, a couple's guide to overcoming disappointment, avoidance, and pressure. This is a total how-to book. Describes the problems that get people stuck avoiding sex because it's become difficult and stressful and fraught even. But it also guides you through a process you take with your partner to have the conversations that you need to have, and then an actual exercise, a whole process around touch and experience that helps you transform your sex life. So if you are stuck in your relationship in a place where you're avoiding sex, or if you know anyone like that, please seek out the book. You can find it on Amazon, both in paperback and on Kindle, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, and so what are the problems you see with men who might be struggling with infertility between them?
Yep. So there are three, well, four. There are four problems. One is low desire, just like, and I think I kind of talked about that a little bit.
Right.
Right, with the stress and all of that. And the other is premature ejaculation, so early ejaculation, where he's having anteportal ejaculation. That is, he ejaculates before intercourse happens.
Uh,
Those cases, in my practice, I send them to, because usually time is of the essence.
yeah.
We're looking at a couple in their mid 30s and they want to become pregnant. I will send them to the urologist for treatment with basically an antidepressant that's taken on demand that hopefully slows things down for them.
Okay.
So that's one presentation. Another one is erectile dysfunction. That can develop for all kinds of reasons. It can be the pressure, it can be ambivalence about becoming pregnant, it can be tension in the couple's relationship. It can also be for men, and this is kind of interesting, I think, that men to this day, even if they have a partner who's working, and even if the partner intends to keep working, or even if the partner is the higher earner, because of the way men are socialized, they start to worry about, how are we going to pay for everything? Right? How are we going to pay for everything? And how am I going to provide for my family?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even if nobody is talking about that. I mean, sometimes they know, the couple knows, they've already planned, okay, woman is going to stay home for a bit, or maybe for the entirety of raising children, whatever they decide. But, many women are working these days, but still the guy is worried about financial problems. And, financial problems are the number one stress for men that can lead to the development of erectile dysfunction.
Wow.
So
Okay.
sometimes it's showing up there. And then the fourth problem is delayed ejaculation, and that is when a couple is having intercourse for minute upon minute upon minute, like 15 minutes is going by, 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Right.
By this time, the woman is like, ugh, I'm dried out. I'm tired. I've had enough. The guy is like, I've had enough too. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And and of course, sometimes that is a problem that the couple has struggled with all the way along.
Right.
This is, also a cause of infertility, is delayed ejaculation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So usually for those men, I usually get referrals from the urologist, because there isn't too much that can be done medically.
Right.
Or what can be done is intrusive, so there can be sperm extracted.
Yes.
Yes, right. So, and as you can imagine, most men are like not too fond of that idea.
Yeah.
So they will come in and work on that. And sometimes it's resolving ambivalence about becoming pregnant, or ambivalence about the relationship. Sometimes it's the man has to learn more what gets him turned on, and
Right.
be able to communicate that to his partner without being embarrassed. So,
Yeah. And if we're talking about the sort of minimum requirement sex and robotic, and that's not very arousing, right? Like
no, no,
either partner might have trouble with an orgasm at that point, because
right,
it's just not very exciting. We're treating it like a lab experiment or something.
right. Yeah.
So that leads into another question, which is how do you recommend that couples, if they're facing infertility, if they're trying to get pregnant, there's this tendency, I guess, for sex to get robotic. How do they keep romance and eroticism in their relationship while they're doing this?
Right. Well, some couples have never had.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so how do they either get it or keep it?
Well, sometimes it gets to the point where the couple has to stop trying for pregnancy. And I've told couples at times, just if they're under treatment, to talk to the physician about taking a little break, like a 2 or 3 month break. And I've never had a physician say, "What? You
But
can't do that."
have
Right?
you had
I say, "Yeah, I mean,
couples?
this isn't supposed to be so frustrating that you're ready to get divorced because your sex life has deteriorated." So they'll usually give the thumbs up.
But
And
will couples push back on that? Because I'm imagining they're thinking, wait, every month counts. We can't let one pass by.
you know what? In my experience, what I've gotten is head nodding. Like,
Okay.
yeah, you know what? We have to stop whatever cycle is going on, which is, having sex, the sex being crummy, not looking forward to having it again, then a disappointing result. And,
Okay.
can you imagine having crummy sex and then a disappointing result from the crummy
Right.
sex is going to make
Right.
it, the whole thing really awful. So they usually are on board. And they're, part of it too is that they're motivated. So, and for these couples, stopping and in a therapist's office, which is good, is having them be able to talk openly about what they feel is the holdup. So whatever the resentments might be, whatever hurt feelings there are, whatever the expectations are, to have a safe place to talk about them. Because, like having crummy sex and then talking about it in bed afterwards
Yeah. Right.
is like not a
Right.
good idea. So just even learning that, you can talk about sex outside the bedroom and talk about it like any other topic of interest to you as a
Yeah.
couple. And then I usually assign sensate focus activities, slow touching activities to get them to remind themselves of what it means to be sensual, and also to find other things to do that are pleasurable besides sex that make them feel close and bonded. So whether
Hmm.
it's going out for Thai food, or getting massages, or taking a little trip somewhere a weekend away, all of those things are good to remind couples, what, you're more than this. You are more than a couple trying to make a baby.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It seems like, there would be so much for them to talk about, to take to deal with the pressure and the expectations. And like you were saying, the ambivalence,
Right?
and the
Yep.
sadness and grieving they might be feeling it, that starting to accept that maybe they're not going to be able to make a baby, or,
Right.
you know,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So I mean, you can imagine, how stressful it becomes when, there comes a point where babies are not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if the couple they're not really on the same page throughout the process, that could cause some kind of irreparable damage to the relationship.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Could you speak just a little bit to, let's say, couples have gone through treatment and they end up pregnant. Um,
Yes.
what
Yes.
what advice do you have, during the pregnancy, after the pregnancy?
Oh,
they've
yes.
gone through this
Yes.
big scientific ordeal to make this baby, and I'm sure they're, delighted
Right.
that this has worked. But what kind of
Yes.
impacts and advice do you have?
Yes, absolutely. So that is something that I do talk about couples. It's kind of interesting how many couples, once they kind of slow things down, how quickly they do become pregnant.
Yeah, some of
Yeah,
them. Yeah.
some of them, right? Yeah. So anyway, but at that point, I talk about some of the changes that happen during the pregnancy. So, for example, usually at the pattern tends to be the first trimester, not being too terribly interested in sex for the woman, because she's often not feeling well. She has morning sickness. She's tired. Second trimester, usually there's an increase in hormones, surge in hormones, and more blood being pumped into the pelvic area. So she may experience more desire and want to have sex more frequently. And then at the last trimester, things are slowing down again because the mechanics are are starting to get a little tough. And she's usually, once again, tired, distracted, and so on. Of course, some couples have sex throughout the pregnancy. They don't stop.
Hmm.
I've had couples say, "Oh, we had sex up until she went into labor." So I've heard that. But I've also had couples that said, we weren't really sexual during the pregnancy." You know what? If they're both not interested, that's fine.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That no problem. But if one is interested and the other isn't, that can create difficulty.
Yeah.
And I've had couples come in during pregnancy sometimes, not because I was maybe I had treated them, 2 years ago.
Right.
And they come in during the pregnancy because the woman feels like something's wrong. He's not interested in me at all, like at all.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. There can be, during pregnancy, changes in the body that make intercourse uncomfortable or unwanted. And of course, women on bed rest, that's a whole thing too.
Right.
And by the way, couples are at risk of affairs during pregnancy. Why? Because sometimes women don't feel like having sex during the pregnancy, or they're told not to. There are certain conditions. And, the couple doesn't talk about it. I mean, why can't they? They can still be sexual with each other, even if she can't have intercourse.
Right.
Maybe she can be present while he pleasures himself, or, they should at least talk about it. So that's that. But, and then postpartum, oh my gosh, that's a whole other.
Yeah. I actually did one episode on that quite a while back. If people want to go back and listen, or maybe we'll do another one. I'm imagining too, just from my own experience, remembering couples, right? Like some of them are going to come through that infertility process, even pregnant, and sex has been tainted or ruined. I mean, it feels that way. It's become scientific, and they've lost the ability to go back to passionate erotic sex somehow, or they come through and they're so happy they can resume sex in a more satisfying way. Like it, it seems like it goes both ways.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So where can people learn more about you, find your books, things like that?
Oh, wonderful. So I do have a book out called Counseling Couples Before, During, and After Pregnancy, Sexuality and Intimacy Issues. And then I also have a little bit about this in my textbook, which is called What Every Mental Health Professional Needs to Know About Sex. And of course, those are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and the Springer Publishing website. And then for anyone looking for sex therapy in the Orange County area, I have my private practice site, which is the BeuhlerInstitute.com. And then for any therapists who are listening who might be interested in getting training in sex therapy, I have a website called LearnSexTherapy.com, and we have a couple of different training formats for therapists and counselors.
Great. I'll make sure we get all those links in the show notes too for people, so they don't have to be trying to write this.
Yes, right.
They listen. So we'll put them all in there. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me today.
Of course, Jessie. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.